My dear listeners, this is an original sci-fi story I wrote for you. If you'd like to support me, just subscribe to the channel. It really helps the growth. The radiation would kill any living thing in under a minute. Mira Voss knew that when she pulled the cub behind the ruined bulkhead and covered his body with her own. The Threscian child, barely 18 months old by his species reckoning, all black and amber fur and wide silver eyes, had frozen when the emergency beacon went dark and the reactor housing cracked open. He didn't understand what the pale blue light meant. Mira did. She'd worked decontamination salvage for 11 years. She knew exactly what a breached fission core looked like when it started singing. She curled herself around him like a shell around something precious and soft. The light swallowed them both. Mira woke in a place she didn't recognize, which was unusual, because she was fairly certain she'd died. The ceiling above her was curved white alloy, and the air smelled of antiseptic and something faintly floral, a Threscian comfort scent, she catalogued distantly, used in their hospice facilities. She turned her head. A medical drone hovered at her bedside, its sensors pulsing a dim amber that she associated with confusion in autonomous systems. "You are awake," it said. In the flat declarative way drones announced impossible things. "This is not consistent with your condition upon arrival." "What was my condition?" Mira asked. Her voice sounded like gravel dragged over metal. "Terminal." The drone's sensors cycled. "Radiation exposure at point-blank proximity to a Class 4 breach. We recorded total systemic failure. Organ shutdown cascaded in sequence. You were pronounced dead at the 18-minute mark." A pause. "That was 61 hours ago." Mira sat up. Her hands looked normal. She touched her face normal. No burns. No blistering. She remembered the blue light, the heat, the way her skin had felt like it was being peeled back layer by layer. She remembered the cub's heartbeat under her palms, rapid and terrified, and she remembered making a decision she didn't regret. "The cub," she said. "Ro. Where is Ro?" The drone redirected her without answering the question she'd actually asked, which told her plenty. She found him in a recovery ward on the lower level, curled in the center of an observation nest with his knees pulled to his chest and his tail wrapped so tightly around his own body that he looked like he was trying to hold himself together from the outside. When the door opened, his silver eyes snapped to her, and something cracked open in his expression that she recognized across every species barrier she'd ever encountered. It was the look of a child who had decided not to hope anymore, confronting hope anyway. "Mira Warm," he said, which was what he called her. She'd never corrected him. His translator was rudimentary. He was too young to have a fully calibrated unit, and he expressed himself in impressions and compound words rather than sentences. "Gone still. Gone cold. I came back," she said. He was across the room before she finished the sentence, slamming into her with the full force of 30 kilograms of juvenile apex predator, his claws careful in the way that young Threscians learn to be careful around soft-skinned species. Deliberate, controlled, a tenderness that required work. She held on. He was shaking. She didn't say anything about it. "Saw blue light take you," he whispered into her shoulder. "Told you go away, go away. You didn't go away." "No," she agreed. "I didn't." They stayed like that for a while. Elder Vasshur of the Threscian Territorial Council was not what Mira expected. She'd met Threscian adults before, large, predatory, their bioluminescent stripe markings flickering with status signals she'd spent years learning to read. Vasshur was old enough that his markings had gone pale at the edges, which she knew indicated extreme age. He was also, she realized when he entered the room, extremely upset. His stripe pattern was cycling too fast, the way a very controlled individual looked when they were barely holding the control. "The human lives," he said, "not a greeting, an accounting of impossible facts." "So I've been told." Mira stood with Ro pressed against her left side, his claws loosely hooked in the fabric of her borrowed medical tunic. "Why don't you tell me why someone sabotaged the Colwyn Station reactor and left your ward unsupervised during the breach window?" Vasshur's markings stilled. That was more surprising than the upset had been. He told her. Ro's full name was Rovas Therenkas. She hadn't known the last part, and he was the only surviving offspring of territorial matriarch Therenkas, who had died in an accident that was not an accident 14 months ago. The Fracture Bloc, a political faction pushing to dissolve the Territorial Council and open Threshian space to unchecked mining contracts with 3 outer system corporations, needed the Matriarch's line extinguished. While the Matriarch's bloodline survived, her claim to the territorial seat survived. While the seat survived, the protections on Threshian colony worlds survived. Without Rho, 6 inhabited systems became resource extraction zones within a standard year. The reactor sabotage was the 4th attempt, Vasher said. The previous 3 we intercepted. This one, we did not learn of it quickly enough. He was already inside the station when the breach was triggered. Something shifted in the Elder's expression. You were not supposed to be there. You were a salvage contractor, reassigned to that sector 6 hours before. You had no reason to be in Corridor 7. I heard him, Mira said simply. He was scared. I followed the sound. Vasher regarded her for a long moment. His markings pulsed in a slow pattern she didn't have a word for yet. The Xenobiology Division has been studying your scans since your revival, he said finally. Your species was assessed at first contact as Category 6 hazard, high gravity origin, endurance adapted, exceptional pain tolerance. But the assessment was updated 60 hours ago. He held her gaze. Humans appear to possess a cellular repair mechanism that activates under extreme duress. Your body did not simply survive the radiation. It responded to it. Adaptive upregulation of repair proteins at a rate we have not documented in any species from any world. Your cells began reconstructing faster than the radiation could destroy them. That's not. Mira started, then stopped. She thought about the salvage workers who'd survived cave-ins that should have been unsurvivable. The stories of humans pulled from reactor leaks who walked out of medical bays too soon. The colleague who'd taken a full coolant burst to the face and lost the eye but healed the surrounding tissue in days when the doctor said weeks. She'd always thought those were exceptional cases. Maybe they were. Maybe every one of them had just been pushed far enough. Your daughter tried to tell you, Ro said suddenly. Both adults looked down at him. His silver eyes were fixed on Vasher, serious with the particular gravity of young Threshians who had grown up too fast. Before, at the nest assessment, she said humans were worth more study. You said she was too young to write policy. Vasher looked at the cub for a long moment. Yes, he said quietly. I did. He turned back to Mira, and his markings cycled through something that in Threshian body language meant debt acknowledged, debt recorded, obligation entered. By the old law of the Territorial Council, he said, you died shielding a ward of the blood seat. His breath continued because yours ended. Whatever your intentions, the law does not negotiate with intentions. You are kin by interposition. His guardianship falls to you until he reaches majority. A pause. 11 years. Mira looked down at Ro. He looked back up at her. Mira warm stays? He asked. Mira warm stays, she said. The Fracture Bloc learned about the revival within 72 hours. She hadn't expected otherwise. The bounty notices went up within the week. Ro alive for leverage, Mira dead or delivered for study. Every bioweapons researcher in 4 systems apparently wanted to know how to neutralize the human repair response before they had to face it in a field context. She found this more amusing than frightening. She'd already died once and found it a temporary inconvenience. They moved through 6 safe house locations in the first 3 months, never staying long enough for a pattern to solidify. Mira learned the Threshian script so Ro could read her handwritten notes. Ro learned to tie 17 different knots so Mira could sleep 2 hours extra in the morning. He was underneath the claws and the ancient predator instincts and the weight of a bloodline that governed 6-star systems. A child who liked puzzles and slept badly after nightmares and needed someone to stay in the room until he dropped off. She stayed. The mercenaries came with neural disruptors. She was resistant. They came with contact toxins. Her skin metabolized the compounds before they reached systemic levels. A Fracture Bloc operative with a long-range rifle put a round through her left shoulder at a distance that should have been unsurvivable. She was back on her feet in 9 days. The medic treating her called it obscene. She called it inconvenient. What they still didn't understand, what the xenobiologists were only beginning to formalize in their reports, was that Mira was not operating on threat assessment. Threat assessment implied calculation, a weighing of options, a self-preservation subroutine running underneath the decision-making. She had none of that. She had 11 years of guardianship, a child with silver eyes who called her Mira warm, and a perfectly uncomplicated willingness to put herself between him and anything that moved toward him with bad intentions. She didn't think about whether she'd survive. She thought about whether he would. That, the xenobiologists were learning, was possibly the most dangerous thing about humans. Not the healing, not the endurance, not the pain tolerance or the high-gravity musculature or the predator pattern recognition running hot behind the soft social faces. It was that they decided, and once they decided, the decision was simply done. Mira Voss had decided. Let them come.